But when the truth finally came out, the truth, it makes a mockery of even the central tenets of Christianity. There is no possibility of my forgiving you. The question is, how on earth can you forgive yourself?
In 1936, the United Kingdom was shaken up by one of its biggest scandals. Just 11 months after his ascension, King Edward VIII abdicated and has since been known as David, the Duke of Windsor. His insistence on making Wallis Simpson his queen, despite her being a 2 times divorced woman, led to the falling out of what is the institution of the crown and its leader, the king himself. In the episode Vergangenheit of the Netflix original The Crown, the former king is on a quest of forgiveness for his sins, even though there is no sense of wrongdoing on his part. He reaches out to the British people, politicians, and the monarchy. The title of the episode was chosen very deliberately. Vergangenheit is German for past. Using the German word hints at a connection of his past towards Germany. The episode begins by juxtaposing David's carefree life during the mid-50s with the discovery of the Marburg files by American soldiers at the end of World War II. Those files contain proof of his connection to Nazi high command and their correspondence during the Second World War. We are not immediately previewed to the extent of his actions. Instead, the show is building up tension and curiosity by hinting at his wrongdoings. The episode is full of clever juxtapositions. David's talk about forgiveness for his past is contrasted with the revelation of his actual wrongdoings concerning the Nazis. David's rising star among the British elites is juxtaposed by the Queen being made aware of the Marburg files, which initiates his downfall. This accumulates in a meeting between David and the Queen. Without her approval, all of his efforts to once again become a respected member of the British royalty are in vain. Throughout the entire episode, the character of the Queen is in sharp contrast with the character of David. Her humbleness is juxtaposed to his arrogance. At their meeting, she confronts him with his Nazi past, but instead of asking for forgiveness, he justifies his actions. He never has any sense of wrongdoing. Instead, he claims he was working with Hitler to avoid bloodshed. Given that the answer is hollow at best and inconsistent with existing evidence and testimony, Elizabeth is left wondering if she can forgive him for his complicity in the Nazi crimes. It is at this point that another key character in this episode comes into play. Billy Graham was one of the most influential evangelical preachers who was active during the second half of the 20th century. At the beginning of the episode, we see Elizabeth taking an interest in his teachings, leading to him being invited to preach at the palace and have a private audience with the Queen. They talk about what it means to be a Christian, and it boils down to striving to become more like Christ. This includes forgiving those who have wronged you, which makes her want to forgive David. But before she makes an official decision, she is encouraged to meet with the private secretary of her late father. There isn't a person who knows more about this subject matter, and he'll provide her with additional information. I think it's a pretty cool idea to reveal the information piece by piece. Not only is this a great way to build tension, we also see how the character deals with different circumstances, strengthening their characterization. And it encourages the audience to think along. Up to what point can we forgive? Where is our red line? When she eventually meets with the former secretary, he reveals the extent of her uncle's crimes to her. According to him, David's motives weren't noble at all. He wasn't out for peace. He was out for the throne, a regency to his liking by Hitler's mercy. He was willing to overthrow his own brother. He helped the Germans by giving them English battle plans and advised them to make the British people ready for peace by a continuation of bombing them.
But perhaps worst of all, the Duke told the German government that resolve in the United Kingdom in the face of the German aerial bombardment was weakening, and that continued bombing, that is, the continued slaughter of his fellow countrymen and former subjects, would, I quote, soon make Britain ready for peace.
All of this happened after he visited a concentration camp with Hitler, and he had close relationships with Nazi high command. Of course, those details are not content of the Marburg files which were made public. It is my understanding the conversation in the show is much more detailed than what we will ever know for certain. Therefore, not every detail and description of the given events can be considered to be 100% accurate, yet they fit in the overall picture we have of David. Although some of the claims have not been fully substantiated, the claims are based on evidence or alleged quotes from David. After listening to those atrocities, her resolve is shattered. She hopes to find guidance in Graham's sermons, but struggles to make up her mind about forgiving David. The Bible has a clear answer. There is no way around forgiveness. And forgive our debts as we forgive our debtors. But eventually she comes to believe that she cannot forgive him for what he has done. She proceeds to expel him from the country.
And I'm sure you don't need reminding that under the terms of the agreement reached after the abdication, you are permitted to return to the United Kingdom only at the pleasure and invitation of the sovereign.
Yes?
I find myself unable to grant that permission.
Yet her conscience is deeply troubled by her inability to forgive, despite her deep conviction that forgiveness is at the heart of her Christian faith. She once again seeks the counsel of Graham. They come back to the question of the nature of Christ and what it means to be a Christian, and while there is no alternative to forgiveness, he gives her a straightforward but at the same time extremely challenging answer to her struggle.
The solution for being unable to forgive. One asks for forgiveness oneself, humbly and sincerely, and one prays for those that one cannot forgive.
Her shortcoming is her inability to forgive, but at the same time, she is also given the privilege to ask for forgiveness for her shortcomings. Of all the episodes in the series, this one is the most personal, as it takes a very close look at the Queen's personal faith, while also dealing with such a fascinating historical subject as the Windsor's involvement with the Nazis. Another interesting aspect the episode touches upon is the ousting of Edward as king. The official story is that he abdicated because of his relationship with Wallace Simpson, but throughout the episode he implies other motives as reason for the institution turning against him.
I came to my own mind.
Well, you have no mind of your own. That's why everyone's so thrilled with you. The last royal to have a mind of his own was me, and that's why they threw me out.
He is referring to the effort of all the institutions of the British society to oust him as king, after he turned basically every single one of those institutions against himself. The church's problem with him marrying a divorced woman needs no further explanation. In the meanwhile, the political class wasn't filled with him either, because Edward had a history of making political remarks which is very unbecoming for a king and led to a backlash against him, hence the line about him being the last king to have a mind of his own. And concerning his perspective on the Nazis, a quote of Alan Lassell, who served as Edward's private secretary, sums up the general attitude after Edward's deemed an alliance between Great Britain and Nazi Germany to be a necessity. The best thing that could happen to him would be for him to break his neck. All this led to the Parliament threatening to resign if Edward was unwilling to compromise, which eventually led to his abdication. And even after he was gone, they made sure he was far away in the Bahamas because he still posed a significant threat to the British military operations during the Second World War. It's reassuring to see the institutions like the church, parliament and the press standing up to a king whose ideas go against everything the country stands for. Speaking of the Church of England, at the beginning of the episode the issue of the meeting between the Queen and Billy Graham is raised by the Queen's personal assistant. The Queen, who is the head of the Church of England, is seeking advice from an American evangelist. For this reason the meeting had to take place out of the public eye, so as not to raise any embarrassing questions. The absurdity of the whole situation and the fact that the monarch becomes the head of the church without any qualification is perfectly illustrated. This is not to say that the Queen doesn't know the teachings of the Bible, but you'd expect someone extraordinary to be head of the church, right? At the same time, the whole situation is a testament to her humility, asking for guidance despite her position of queen and head of the church. And at last, when it comes to the more general criticism, I will make it very short. The show generally never disappoints, whether it's the acting, set design, music, or cinematography. So what we are left with is an excellent episode of television and the question, what could have been if Edward VIII wasn't forced to abdicate? What would the world look like if the British throne was occupied by an ally of Hitler? Could he have turned the tides of the war in the Nazis' favor and thrown Europe into darkness? You don't even want to imagine. I just love how it says on the wiki page of the Marburg files, the release of the files was reported to have caused the Duke considerable annoyance.